beginning of the end for you.
To the sky!
Bestowed upon you the power of the sun.
A mighty sword!
Strike while the iron's hot.
For Camazotz! For Avalon!
Let the heavens rain! I am Ragnarok!
Happy Sunday, SMITE fans, and welcome to another day of the SMITE Pro League here in Week 5 of Phase 3. We've got a triple header ahead for you guys, just as we do on all of our Sundays, and also a good shout out to our friends over at Prime Gaming, who are the title sponsor of Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. If you don't have a Prime membership already, make sure that you get that and make the most of it by getting some free music, movies, shipping, and a little bit more. Add that over to your Twitch account and get Prime Gaming so you can get free games, free content for games you're already playing, and a free Twitch Prime subscription to your favorite streamer every single month. And every month, those games keep rotating in and out. So if you didn't quite like the games that are here this month, just wait until it turns over and you get all new games and all new content out there. Thank you so much for Prime Gaming for being the title sponsor of Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. I'm J-Mac Tucker. I got Trelly Relly joining me on the desk as we jump in to our triple header for today. We got some pretty big matchups here, some pretty important ones for some of these teams as well moving in through our phase.
Yeah, so it seems, right? I can see that we've got the Bolts and the Scarabs already in studio, so that's going to be an exciting one because we've been talking about the standings, and being in that bottom three right now is somewhere you do not want to be. So I think both of these teams really need to get a dub, and I think it would be massive for them both.
Yeah, and I think you're right to bring up being in the bottom three is going to be a difficult position, especially if you want to make it to the SMITE World Championships. You want to be in that top 6 position. You want to be as high up in the standings as you can be, because once Phase 3 is done, we move into our Phase 3 playoffs. It's our top 6 teams from the SPL Phase 3 move to there. We take the top 4 from that, kick them all the way straight to Arlington, all the way in January. But if you don't make it at that point, you got to wait until the SCC qualifiers are done, those 2 weeks in December. We'll take the top 4 teams, 2 from each of the 2 regions respectively, NA and EU, and then take the 4 SPL teams that didn't qualify, throw them all together for one final bracket, and take the top 4 from there to be the last 4 teams to make it, to give us our top 8 teams at the SMITE World Championship, January 13th through 15th in Arlington, Texas. So the more games that you win now, the less games you have to win later in order to make it to the SMITE World Championship. So making sure that you are out of those bottom 2, making sure you're in the top 6, puts you that much closer and makes it that much easier for you to be able to qualify in toward that position out there. And for some of these teams, those games are even more so important, as you were saying, kind of talking about the teams that are in the bottom 3 right now, teams like the Bolts, which is a weird position to even be kind of talking about right now, that the Bolts, who were such a dominant team in previous phases, now in that position. The Solar Scarabs, Valhalla Valkyries kind of joining there. We can take a look, though, at the schedule to see what matchups we have available for you guys today. As mentioned, we're starting off with the Olympus Bolts and the Solar Scarabs. Next off would be the Camelot Kings and the Valhalla Valkyries, another bottom 3 team in the Valks, looking to try and find themselves some more wins to help themselves try and find a way out of the bottom 3. And then the Leviathans and the Titans to round out our day. Titans found a nice win yesterday over against the Oni Warriors. Leviathans got a win over the Valkyries as well, so should be a good matchup to kind of close out our day as well. And taking a look at the standings and really kind of what's on the line more than anything, with the Titans being able to find that win yesterday, Trelly, they shored up that gap that was really separating that top 4 and that bottom 4. I mean, it was 5 wins and up for everybody in top 4, 3 wins and below for everybody in the bottom 4. But now with that win, at least by the Titans, they're kind of able to mitigate that a little bit. It's a 4-4, and it makes it that much closer and that much easier to trying to get themselves into a top spot for teams like the Titans, teams like the Bolts.
Yeah, so if you're the Scarabs here, a win would be, it's pretty much exactly what you need, right? You don't want to be stuck at that 1-win slot. Keeping the Bolts at a solid 3, you jump up to 2. That gap becomes a lot smaller, but 4-1, that's going to be a situation that's going to be almost impossible to come back from. So I imagine the Solar Scarabs going to be zoned in for this matchup in particular. But either way, of course, as you were talking about, the Bolts, not a team that you expect to be in this situation, right? They had a phenomenal phase number 1, and I think just a little bit, losing Haddix obviously was probably not something they were planning for, and they've been trying to bounce back. Baskin's been a great addition. Like, he's been popping off, honestly, been a joy to watch, but you got to think they're mental. They've been trying to jump back to that phase 1 Bolt that we've seen before.
Yeah, they're definitely trying to get themselves in a much more comfortable position as they start moving towards Worlds, they start moving towards this playoff stage by trying to kind of rebuild themselves and maybe kind of reshape their identity a little bit more so. We've also been seeing some change-ups as far as some of the picks are concerned there. We've been seeing a lot of priority, making sure to get at the dual lane a little bit earlier, making sure to also give Venenu something very comfortable in that mid lane. The Cernunnos and the Soul have kind of been two picks that have been rising back up for the Bolts, and we've even seen some of these picks kind of go back to what was working so well for them.
Yeah.
I mean, Awesome Jake on the Xing Chen as of recent looked really strong, something that he was very potent on in times prior to that. So kind of seeing the Bolts find their identity once again and kind of find themselves a little bit more so is at least got to be a nice little point out there for the fans. And speaking of Awesome Jake, we've actually got him standing by for our pregame interview with Dolson.
That's right, standing by with Awesome Jake. And Jake, look, you guys have now strung a couple of wins together back-to-back against the Oni Warriors. Do you get the read that your team is the type that just, you need a couple, and you're going to really start to get things going here at the end of the phase?
Yeah, getting that first win was pretty big for us because, things weren't looking too great. But now we're like desperate animals, and we really need these last couple wins here. Our backs are against the wall. So, we're going to lash out, do anything we can to get these last couple wins because we need them desperately.
That's right, erratic behavior, things like that. Look, and top 6 is really what we look at for Phase 3 playoffs. Bottom 2 have to go to the group stages early in January. You guys have a couple wins ahead of both the Valkyries and the Scarabs, obviously going against the Scarabs today. Do you feel that weight, trying to get a win here, further separate yourself from those bottom 2 teams? Is there a little extra in this matchup for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, this one is definitely, pretty big. Trying to, get a nice big gap.
Yeah, right.
Between the, yeah.
Well, look, your team, you had a roster change kind of halfway through the phase. You bring in Baskin. Wasn't the immediate turnaround, the immediate synergy. Do you feel like now in the last couple of games you finally started to hit what you expected you could be adding Baskin into the solo lane?
Yeah, I mean, we started winning, which feels good. Baskin's, been doing great. And, we've all been stepping it up, I think. So, yeah.
How about on the flip side, the team you're playing against here today, also a team that had to go through some roster changes seemingly every few weeks, something happening with the Solar Scarabs. Now they have Hurriwind over in support, Yark in ADC. What's your take on their duo lane? Do you imagine different play styles from the last time you played the Scarabs earlier on this phase?
Yark's a pretty good player. Personally, I think he's probably looked the best in ADC over the course of this year. So, that's something they got going for them. And, Hurriwind, he's new. He was a caster. Now he's a player. So,
Well, he was a player, then he was a caster, and now he's a player again, I think is how it's working with Hurriwind. Yeah. Unsure. Do you feel like the duo lane is an area where you guys can really put some pressure here today? Do you feel like BaRRaCCuDDa is a win condition early against the Scarabs?
Yeah, I believe we can jam it and get a dub.
You're not allowed to do that. That's the Jazzberry Jammers. You guys, what do? You bolt up?
I guess we can bolt them.
You're bolting them. You heard it here first. Awesome Jake in the duo lane, bolting the Scarabs here today. I appreciate you, and good luck in your matchup. We'll head back to the desk to start this one off.
Well, we'll see if the Olympus Bolts can indeed bolt the Scarabs down.
It up.
Bolt it up. Bolt it up. Man, you got to think about the chance sometimes.
That's what I'm saying. I'm trying to create one for you Bolts fans. What else would you do?
That's a good point. Like, whenever we get to World Championships and we get to the world stage, hearing those chants every so, like whenever it was the old battle, the EU versus NA, it'd always be EU or NA. And it was almost always NA because there's a primarily North American crowd out there. So Olympus Bolts fans out there, maybe feeling.
Bolts.
You're trying.
I'm trying. I'll make something.
We'll figure something.
I'm sure you guys have one already.
They probably got like 10 of them already, and they're looking at us like we're
there's like a Bolts
fools.
fan Discord. They're all like, okay, we should go like Olympus Bolts, or they're figuring something out. I'm sure.
Where to put the inflection out there. But up against them is the Solar Scarabs, and kind of as mentioned in that interview, and something that we've been talking a lot about with it is that this is a team that has gone through roster change after roster change after roster change. And this isn't just something that's happened this year. I mean, this is something that even kind of plagued the Scarabs moving in towards last year in Season 8. And it's kind of just been it's so weird to say this, but it's kind of just been the norm of this team is that somebody is being pulled from this team, pulled over to a better team necessarily as far as standings is concerned. And then usually that player is either doing really well or that team is a little bit better off. And you look at the Tartarus Titans, who were kind of a middle-of-the-pack team last year. They bring layers into their squad from the Scarabs, and all of a sudden this team is now popping off, and they're runner-up world champions at that point. And now we have a team that's been able to pull BaRRaCCuDDa away from the Dragons after they lost Scream. They brought Jarcorrr over away from the Leviathans, brought him into support, now into the Hunter role. And then now they've got Hurriwind, who they pulled up from the SCC, who was SPL mid laner for a little while, and now has made his way to being SPL support. So this is a team that is constantly trying to re-identify themselves, constantly trying to regain their footing after losing player after player every single time.
Yeah, and it's definitely not something that's easy to do, especially this late into the season when, as we've been talking about, you probably figured out by now, Worlds is right around the corner. But I do imagine the Solar Scarabs have been tired of that as well, right? I think they're tired of this conversation of, like, you know, they're really close, right? They're almost, you know, building up that synergy. They almost are able to get these wins. So I think that hunger can either manifest in two different ways, right? Either just like, okay, we can't win, give up, or how it's more so what it's been looking like. They're hungry, right? They want that win, and I think they've been trying different strategies to try and get those dubs. Sitting at like, what, 1-7 or 1-6 right now? You would love to double that, right? You would love to be a 2 in the win column. So I still imagine they have the strength to do that. I mean, the Awesome Jake was given some credit over to the duo lane. Yark has looked really solid. And I think BaRRaCCuDDa's also been popping off as of recent. Like, it wasn't one of those things where you could tell he wasn't really happy with the roster change at first, but I think he's really come into his own on the Solar Scarabs, so he's been looking pretty clean as well. I do imagine that the Solar Scarabs are feeling a little bit more confident, especially coming into this matchup.
Yeah, and I think something that even Jake mentioned that kind of also doubles in with the Scarabs is they're desperate for wins, man.
Yeah, exactly.
They're hungry to get anything that they can find out there, whether that be a single game or a single set extra out there. So both these teams really trying to fight, and really all of our teams that are in that bottom 3 position right now, because only 6 teams are making it into the Phase 3 playoffs, and you don't want to be the one, or you don't want to be one of those 2 teams that don't end up making it. So if the Scarabs can find that set win, double up their record, put themselves only now 1 game potentially closer to overtaking the Olympus Bolts, could be a big thing for them. But it all starts out in the picks and bans. We've got game number 1's picks and bans ready to go for you guys right now. Olympus Bolts and the Solar Scarabs, our number 7 seed team with the Scarabs against the number 6 Olympus Bolts for the time starting out. And as the bans immediately begin to kick off, Pele, the first ban out there. Maybe not something that we would typically see as a first ban, but considering how much LASBRA really loves this pick, how well the Bolts do when LASBRA can get this early game style of pop-off pick, maybe not so surprising that the Solar Scarabs banned this one away first, Charlie.
Yeah, I'm not too concerned with the nature of the pick. I just think focusing LASBRA is going to be the call here for the Scarabs, and that is the call so far. The Bastet is going to follow as well. Just trying to make sure that LASBRA can't get off to an explosive start. Definitely a smart call. They've been watching their games, and they realize, hey, when LASBRA doesn't pop off in the early, the Bolts don't look as clean. So taking away the Pele, the Daji, and the Bastet, definitely going to be a good call. So LASBRA's going to have to go at least 3 deep now for the God pick. If he waits longer, could take some more bans, but the Cernunnos is going to be the first grab here. We've seen this played in mid. We've seen it played over in the duo lane. It just brings a lot of extra shred in. It's just got a pretty good matchup into just about everyone right now. So a smart call, not too many counters available.
The fact that we're sitting triple assassin ban and it's a Cernunnos first pick for the Scarabs and then Cupid on the opposite side. Now, the Cern is something that Venenu has been playing a little bit as far as that mid lane is concerned. Do you think that maybe that could end up being the call for BaRRaCCuDDa? I mean, you're looking across the board at a Cupid Ymir dual lane. Is that a lane that you would be wanting to throw a Cernunnos into?
Yeah, I don't think it's the best matchup, but honestly, no one's looking that clean into Cupid and Ymir, except maybe like a Charybdis. You just want to run away the whole time and not try and get aggressive. It definitely could be BaRRaCCuDDa piloting that Cernunnos in the mid lane. It just brings a ton of pressure, and anyone who else in the mid lane besides like an AMC, for example, isn't going to enjoy. This is a pick that BaRRaCCuDDa, though, has looked real solid on this Hun Batz. These Fear No Evils have always been on point. As long as you're able to facilitate your team with that ability, your team fight is always going to look pretty solid, as well as the Atlas being locked in here. So that's going to be a pretty good 1-2 punch, depending on where you're trying to, you know, balance those ultimates. The team fight presence so far from the Scarabs is looking real solid.
Now with the Olympus Bolts, maybe a decision to be made for LASBRA specifically, because now that we've had 4 assassins picked up already, or 4 assassins at least removed from LASBRA's God pool between the Daji, the Bastet, and the Pele, as well as Hun Batz, it does answer the call that Susano will be picked up for the Olympus Bolts. So now the junglers are both locked in. We've got at least the supports and maybe the dual lane hunters. Kind of opens up the idea of maybe where do the bans get allocated at this point? Do you focus out maybe the one quote-unquote good remaining mage out there in Vulcan kind of as a mid lane to take away from the Bolts? Do you just start doing some side lane bans in this regard? It seems that at least for the Olympus Bolts, putting a shot over towards Jarcorrr in the dual lane seems to be the early call.
Yeah, probably smart at this point. It doesn't look like the AMC is going to get too much pressure here in this matchup, I suppose, because no one's really shown any, propriety to want to grab it or take it away. But actually, it's going to be the Poseidon. So some more mages taking shots here. I guess neither team really convinced that all the magical damage is going to be done. We have been seeing a couple more of those double Guardian compositions. We know for a fact that since that Hades is gone, that's really the only magical character, like mage-wise, that you're looking in that solo lane. It's probably going to be a Guardian if you're looking for more magical damage in that regard. So it could be an option there. The Cthulhu comes to mind, that sort of thing. But since we're talking about like the possibility of those mid laners still being available, I do imagine a Vulcan could take a ban here. Just that extra confirm on objectives is always annoying to deal with, especially the turret being able to help your farm so much. You can just drop it at mid camp. You can drop it over at the Pyromancer, red buff, that sort of thing. Could be a ban either one of these teams honestly could look towards.
Yeah, but so far it is just the Freya and the Poseidon, so focusing on some magical damage, whether it be a magical hunter, at least on the side for Jarcorrr, or magical maybe in the mage, in the mid lane, as far as Venenu is concerned. I'm curious as to where the rest of these bans will go through. I mean, solo lane, there's still the pick of the litter. Cthulhu, Artio, if you want to name just a couple of Guardians over there. Guan Yu somehow made its way through. Has been kind of falling out of favor a little bit. I mean, you look at the top bans of the phase, and at one point, Guan Yu was right up there with Yamoja, Cabrakan, and Daji. Has now been slowly falling down. It's kind of the bottom echelon of that one, only sitting at 26% bans so far throughout the entirety of the phase. So curious as to see kind of how the fall of Guan Yu has happened just over the course of these few weeks. And final ban will be the Vulcan, so focusing a little bit towards Venenu for the Solar Scarabs.
Yeah, I want to see what Baskin goes to here. We've seen him play the Odin, for example, and I think that looked pretty solid. Doesn't have the greatest matchup, but you are going to be able to wall in that Cernunnos if that's something you want to look towards. I'm going to be honest, I don't even think it had that great of a matchup when he picked it. It's just Baskin just likes this Odin pick, clearly. The Thor, for example, was something that he's also played. I guess not to too much success, so maybe not really thinking about that one too hard. I'm just trying to see exactly what pressure the Bolts are going to be looking to play through here, because you pick this Susano. You're trying to find a lane and say, this is the lane, right? I'm going to get this lane ahead. And more often than not, LASBRA's been hovering over towards that solo lane, so I imagine Baskin could be in that topic of conversation. It will be the Ishtar lock-in, though, and you got to assume that's going to be for Venenu in the mid lane. Got to bring some good pressure, especially up against that Cernunnos, if that's going to be the case. Has a decent matchup. As long as you're able to hold that ultimate there, you shouldn't be getting aggressed on too much. And because the mid lane is so small, you can essentially cover the entirety of it with that ultimate. You're not missing those Spears of Light.
Ooh. Danzaburrow hover. Now, we haven't seen very much Danzaburrow at all this year. In fact, I think all the way up through in towards Phase 2, he was one of the only gods that hadn't been played so far. Which is so strange considering we look at teams like the Jade Dragons, the Panda Cat. He really loved that pick back in Season 8, but haven't really been seeing a whole lot of light shed towards him. Probably won't be seeing very much on him this time around as it instantly gets pushed away. But, this Ishtar is something that Venenu did really well with in their matchup against the Oni Warriors yesterday. Had a really strong game. I think he ended up ending the game on a triple kill on a Phoenix Siege in game number 3. So, a strong performance out of him on that one yesterday. And so for the Solar Scarabs, I think even maybe wondering what their solo lane was going to be. Camazotz is the answer, so sustain to try and match up against, well, what we still don't know is the solo lane of the Olympus Bolts. Baskin holding on to his pick for last, so Camazotz and potentially on her if this one gets locked in for the Scares. How do you kind of feel about Camazotz currently right now in this meta?
I'm a big fan of the Camazotz. I think that it's just incredibly safe and you can play as aggressive as you really want to. Bat out of hell, such a difficult ultimate ability to try and track down, and especially with the way that Camazotz has been itemizing. Sort of difficult to burn through him, but it looks like it was a bit of a pivot. I'm assuming that Cernunnos was going to mid up until the Solar Scarabs decided as a unit, let's just give BaRRaCCuDDa the Huang and we'll change this one up. And the Bolts finally get to show us Baskin's pick, the Amaterasu. So an incredible amount of objective shred here for the Olympus Bolts. You've got double Hunter, Amaterasu. Shards of Ice is going to help out with some confirmation in the early as well. You can tell the Bolts are looking for objective mind focus, but they still have a good bit of single target damage. If LASBRA wants to get active on the Susano early, I think some decent targets here, the Huang, the Hunbats, the Cernunnos, all going to not appreciate fighting the Susano in the early as is. But the Solar Scarabs, I think they went for a different approach here, just a traditional style of composition. The Camazotz going to be that diver, hopefully, with some backup from Hunbats, and I think that, you can have Hurriwind play either ahead with the dive with that gamma ray burst and try and facilitate the team, or stay back and just use some pulls and try and peel for your squad as well. I think both of these teams have, double dipped into not only just team fight presence, but also a pretty solid late game.
So with that late game, and you kind of mentioned about a lot of the objective play around the Bolts, having the double hunters, having this Amaterasu to kind of help out in that regard. Solar Scarabs have a lot of AoE control comparatively to the Bolts. I mean, you have, for the most part, Fields of Love kind of as the main AoE, at least for the Olympus Bolts, to kind of zone things out there. Ishtar, you can throw out the Sunlight Swords a little bit and kind of zone that little cone away. But, I mean, I'm looking across at Cernunnos, Hun Batz, Atlas, even you, Huang, with the Dueling Dragons. For the Olympus Bolts, how do you even fight into like the Venn diagram of AoEs that the Scarabs have drafted?
Yeah, it's not going to be easy. I mean, you can look at, as you said, the big circles, let's call them. You got the Typhoon, the Fields of Love, especially a wall from Awesome Jake. All of those could just make a disaster in the team fight, but I think the Solar Scarabs are going to try to get ahead early, more so off the back of SMITE on this Hun Batz. There's not too many beads burners here, right? I don't see Fear No Evil getting a ton of value on its own. It's more so after a good pull-in from Hurriwind, or maybe the Wild Hunt comes through and burns some beads in that regard. So it's not going to be easy, but I imagine if SMITE can find some consistent ganks early, first ult, come through, get the beats, come back later, try again. At the very least, you're taking the blue buff, something like that. I do expect to see some aggression in the early, because if not, I think the Bolts late game is pretty much locked in. I mean, it's going to be very difficult to try and fight into that, as you said, a little bit later on.
And I think for me, I'm going to be keeping a lot of eyes on BaRRaCCuDDa in the mid lane on this Huang. We saw what Pagon was able to do with it yesterday on the Jade Dragons. I mean, absolutely two-tapping just about anybody who walked around him that wasn't a tank. Most notably, it was almost always Captain Twig, who would be, unfortunately, kind of caught out being pulled in by a Dueling Dragons into a Phoenix Fire combo. So this Huang has a lot of damage capabilities, has a lot of one-shot potential when it gets to the late game. The Solar Scarabs got to make it to that late game. Can they do so? Solar Scarabs versus the Olympus Bolts. Game number 1. We'll throw it to Tulsin and Mifflin.
That's right, and the Solar Scarabs and the Olympus Bolts this time around carries a little extra weight. These two teams very close in the standings, right on the fringe of being bottom 2. Remember, bottom 2 don't even get a chance at the Phase 3 playoffs. Go right on into the World's group stages early in January. So the Olympus Bolts in a really good spot right now, Miff. They're a few wins up on the Solar Scarabs. If they're able to get a win here, really create some separation. And so you're starting to enter must-win territory mathematically already for the Solar Scarabs down the end of this phase. They've got an interesting composition to fight into the Olympus Bolts with.
Yeah, I like the Scarabs draft top to bottom. SMITE are going to be one of the primary initiators for your team. Hurriwind on a pick. They can get active very early on and just create some space for BaRRaCCuDDa to farm up, Jarcorrr to farm up as well. Scary D on the Camazotz, I think, maybe has his work cut out for him over in the solo lane up against Baskin. The sustain that Amaterasu brings matches up to what Camazotz has got, and then some with the Death Toll. So I'll be keeping my eyes on solo. Feels as if Baskin's probably in a position where he's going to have a much easier time rotating as well, not just by nature of having additional movement speed in the kit, but he's gone for teleport, whereas Scary D's gotten a blink on his side. Maybe looking for some aggressive plays. Could potentially have the Solar Scarabs look to gank out that solo pretty consistently. But the Death primes it very, very well, man. The Olympus Bolts have got a super standard composition that's got pressure in just about every single lane. LASBRA is going to scale very well as he takes over to level 5. Ven should be able to keep BaRRaCCuDDa locked under his tower, and then I don't need to talk about Cupid Ymir. We've seen it a lot.
We've seen it plenty. We have seen it plenty. Yeah, I've wondered when we would see Hurriwind bring the Atlas to the SPL. It's something that when Hurriwind was still playing in the SEC earlier this year, especially when he just switched over to support, Hurriwind looked very good on the Atlas early in his support career. So I wondered when we would see that start to trickle into the SPL. The answer is now. For not only Hurriwind, but maybe the Bolts. They've got damage onto SMITE. Important double root from BaRRaCCuDDa. Maybe keeps his jungler alive. I do think LASBRA carries a little extra weight in this match.
Yikes.
Would love to continue to push back SMITE. Because think back to what we saw from Panatom yesterday, right? I mean, it's hard to replicate that type of performance, but
What was that, 22-0?
yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Well, in the last 2 games,
Laz
Panatom-
got it.
Yeah, certainly gonna skyrocket up the kill columns. But given remember the relic status going in today, you can pick Beads or Aegis, but not both. Beads on all 4 of the carries in this game. And so you imagine Shell comes out at some point. Baskin maybe needs a Shell right now, and he does. It's Solar Scarabs with first blood over on the right side.
Yeah, it looked to me like Baskin was playing a little too far up, didn't quite have the mana to escape there. Starts to work his way towards blue. LASBRA's already there. Perfect jungle situation, you're there to defend. Unfortunately, Soul Inner wasn't quite in range. We'll at least be able to pick up that buff, though. So mana sustain's certainly still there. But a great start for the Solar Scarabs, and not exactly an expensive kill either. ScaraDD gets to maintain his blink. It might cost SamForSoccer his, but anytime a Hunbots is able to get involved pre-5,
Yep.
I mean, that is above and beyond the Call of Duty.
Yeah, I mean, Sam was over there anyway to help out with the blue buff. Why not? Let's see if we can jump on Baskin and slow down this Amaterasu. And that's exactly what happened. And so to go back to LASBRA, I think in the current situation, I guess, the current meta, it's where a pick like Susano can really feast later on in a game, even early potentially. But when the carries are forced to pick Shell, something that can't completely block out all the damage LASBRA's able to do. Got to imagine this Susano's got some good opportunity.
Yeah, I think so. We're probably waiting for a couple of items. Susano, very, very strong, can absolutely one-shot you, but that's after a bit of itemization.
Right.
I'm thinking about Heartseeker, maybe a hi-rez if LASBRA so chooses, the Jotuns, the Brawler's Beat Stick, all the damage, right? Like, he just wants to go down that mace tree. Once we get to about 3-4 items into the build, LASBRA is going to be an individual threat on the map. Until then, needs a little bit of follow-up from the rest of his team, and the rest of his team has got plenty of it. A pull into a Heart Bomb or a pull into the ultimate from Ven might just be enough for LASBRA. So we'll keep our eyes on this Susano. But as of right now, SamForSoccer is going to outpace him on the map. Hunbots just brings a little bit more than Susano when you're both sitting at level 5.
Likely need a bit of time for Ven and BaRRaCCuDDa to get some itemization there as well. I guess that's kind of the ebb and flow of these double ADC compositions. You get great objective shred once a couple of items get online, and really later on in the game, you're going to crush damage in team fights, and tanks are just going to get melted through, but potentially takes a little bit of time to get there. Continued pressure on the right side of the map, though, from the Solar Scarabs. This is now blue buff invade for ScaraDD and SamForSoccer. Remember, last one was just confirming their own blue buff and putting pressure on the Baskin and get first blood. This time, blue buff invade, no kills, but denied XP and gold from Baskin.
Yeah, LASBRA doesn't really like his odds walking into that fight. He gets hit by Fear No Evil and ScaraDD nearby to follow up. Would have likely just lost his life, so instead confirms his own back camps, make sure the situation doesn't go from bad to worse. And Baskin, rightfully so, just sticks around in that lane, make sure he doesn't miss out on too much farm. But losing your blue buff when you're already 2 levels behind, it's not just a blue buff for an Amaterasu. It's essentially a green buff, OG, in that it'll give you constant healing. I don't really have that opportunity anymore. So now Baskin needs to play a little bit more wary around his mana sustain. Fortunately, with relic timers as they are, only 30 seconds until that teleports back up, Baskin can get a bit aggressive here if he so chooses, then start to fall back, head back to base, return. Sure. This next blue buff rotation, though, I do want to see the Olympus Bolts defend it.
That'll be up to LASBRA. Time is worthwhile heading over towards right. Imagine at some point, when we see Shoguns on Amaterasu anyway, but should be in the build here for Baskin, especially with Ven and BaRRaCCuDDa. Ready to go with some of that auto attack damage. Really, though, this type of team, I wonder how the Scarabs are able to respond, because early it's been, you know, just the 1 kill for SamForSoccer, but you imagine with Fear No Evils on a couple of kills, maybe the Solar Scarabs can get some kill pressure going early. It's a team that in the past has really liked playing early game pressure. But they've got to be wary, Miff, around these early objectives. I'm talking first Pyromancer, potentially early Gold Fury, because you got 2 ADCs so close to the Gold Fury pit. Quick rotation in, and the Scarabs will have to be on it.
But I would argue also the Scarabs in a position where they can actually look to play aggressive regardless of that, simply by nature of LASBRA not having beads, Baskin doesn't have beads, and Jake doesn't have beads. Fear No Evil, a massive tool right now. Best case scenario for Jake is channel Shards of Ice, I guess.
LASBRA does choose to defend blue. Fear No Evil down onto the Susano, who's forced to dash away. A dazzling offensive onto ScaraDD. Keeps the Olympus Bolts alive, and it looks like blue buff dropped. So at least golden XP for Baskin and LASBRA, but defended nicely. Teleport in. Should have enough time to go back and pick it up. So good. You get the full benefit here if you're Baskin. And so the answer now clear, Miff. LASBRA does seem to think that defending that blue buff on the right side, a worthwhile interaction. But Hurriwind chose this. Hurriwind dashed forward. The Wild Hunt is onto 2. But the freeze from Awesome Jake and the wall and the shards of ice and all the damage. It's strong enough. Olympus Bolts grab themselves a kill. And aggressive positioning from Hurriwind sets the table.
I couldn't even begin to tell you why that's the decision-making process there. I've got legitimately no idea what's going through Hurriwind's mind right there. Just the dash and aggressive on tower line. Jake and BaRRa had everything. They had all their relics and both their ultimates. I mean, I understand that Atlas can you know, reposition the enemy, maybe create a situation where Jarcorrr can find a wild hunt, but those were long shot odds. And it's not even as if your jungler was nearby either. It's just misclick? Maybe?
Yep, misclick. Accidentally dashed in.
And you can't stop.
At that point, you're
you
saving face, right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I meant to do this, so I got to use everything.
Committing.
Yeah, unfortunately for Hurriwind, that means he's now was about 2 levels down. Call it a level and a half, depending on when Awesome Jake moves over to level 9. Still expect disruption, though, from Hurriwind here this game. We talked a lot about the merits of Atlas early. This God's pick cycle. Almost no damage onto Hurriwind. Instead, Ben looking towards BaRRaCC. It's because LASBRA has ganked in behind. One pull in from Hurriwind, dueling dragons from BaRRaCC. This one's a whiff. SMITE, a potential wrap around the backside of mid lane here, won't commit. Instead, makes his way towards right where another blue buff has respawned and Baskin's got to back off.
Yeah, fortunately, when things go awry in mid, at least your Soul in there is still able to put out some pressure. Clears that blue buff quickly. The Olympus Bolts had briefly considered rotating over, but just happens a little too fast for them. They're going to just let that one go. That's a lot expended by the Solar Scarabs in mid. BaRRaCC without the dueling dragons, now a much easier gank target. That's one of his sources of CC immunity. Hurriwind also gets a bit aggressive there, as he continues to do. BaRRaCCuDDa caught out.
BaRRa uses the beads. And Hurriwind will consider that a worthwhile trade. That's what he was trying to do the first time. A little bit easier this time.
Yeah, 2v1 looking way better for
Much
Hurriwind.
better for the Solar Scarab. Small win for Hurriwind, especially again with that first objective rotation just over the horizon. We've seen teams, especially double ADC comps, pull Pyromancer like almost immediately upon spawn. We'll keep our eyes on positioning here if the Bolts start to head their way to the right side of the map. Now the Scarabs, they'll feel just fine with how this early game has gone. You get first blood. All right, I've maybe doomed Jarcorrr here. He's got to use beads. He's feeling a bit less good about now how this early game has gone. But they've maintained, the Scarabs have about a 1,000 gold lead going into sort of the first big pivot point here in this game. So the Bolts have answered back kills nicely, but a lot of the neutral farm has been stolen away by the Scarabs.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that farm difference is legitimately just Baskin up against ScariD. I think it's probably significant. The Bolts would love to close it up. It's burning quick.
Can Hurriwind make a steal? Down goes the ult, and down goes the Fury to the Olympus Bolts. Hurriwind close on the attempt, but an immediate answer from the Solar Scarabs. Over to the Pyromancer they go. Baskin still hovering close by. It'd have to be a steal attempt now from the Amaterasu, though. There is a rotation in from the rest of the Olympus Bolts. If Fear No Evil, it's used, but it's only onto one. And all that commitment just for the Pyromancer. If the Scarabs can get out, you'll consider it worthwhile. There's no intention of fighting. So Gold Fury one side for the Bolts, Pyromancer on the other for the Scarabs.
Yeah, and I'd argue the Pyromancer actually getting secured by the Scarabs there was a bit cleaner than what we had seen from the Bolts. SMITE very willing to drop that Fear No Evil just to zone out Baskin. Doesn't want to leave it up to any risk. Rightfully so. Your goal is to get that objective and get out, and the Scarabs do it beautifully. Whereas on the other side, it was close on that Gold Fury. The Olympus Bolts were a bit unwilling to use some of those larger cooldowns. Had Jake just channeled Shards of Ice, 0% steal chance. There's nothing Hurriwind can do to stop it. But because you hold on to that burst ability, Hurriwind kept it interesting on that left-hand side. Small mistakes like that, not this time, but could add up and really start to balloon the Solar Scarabs out of control had it gone their way.
Well, how many times have we seen the Bolts win games because objectives are coin flipped in front of them and they're able to steal it away? I mean, they got to be wary. Maybe later on in games around Fire Giants, things like that. You were mentioning how much of that Scarabs lead is just with ScariD. I noticed on the net worth charts, just a few moments ago.
Oh, it's like all of it.
Yeah, almost 800 or so of the just about, call it 300-400 gold lead is for the Solar Scarab solo laner. That's going to get a little bit less now as LASBRA and Baskin jump on ScariD and talk about a perfect target to equalize things.
Yeah, talk about another unwilling usage of the ultimate, right? Just Bat out of hell. It's in the name. Get out of there, man. Unfortunate for SCaryD playing a bit aggressive there. Maybe the silence from Baskin keeps it a bit difficult. It's Ven.
Uh-oh.
Returns damage.
BaRRaCCuDDa thought he had one, but instead LASBRA and Ven combined for damage onto BaRRaCCuDDa.
wall.
The wall is fantastic from Jake, but BaRRaCCuDDa able to slink away. Beads, ultimate, shell, all of it, dash, glide, used by BaRRaCCuDDa. So the bolts will be empty-handed, but return potential now. SMITE, same mindset in mid. Double fear no evil, and the wall separates out Jake. SMITE on the chase. Just needs one more auto. Won't get it. Hurriwind frozen in place. And Ven kiting
He
backwards.
wins those.
Ven has the damage. It's a Fields of Love down. It's unbelievable. And finally, SMITE rejoins the fight, but it's simply taken too long. The Olympus Bolts trade out one.
Not easy to use that Sacred Monkey Toss to teleport to the first target in situations like that. It is a very, very thin window where you can find the teleport, but had SMITE just done it, it would have been a clean pick onto Ven. Instead, forces that one-for-one trade as Hurriwind has to dedicate his life to securing that kill. Not exactly the ideal person to collect that kill either. That bounty on Ven would have felt pretty good for Jarcorrr or SMITE in a situation like that. But at the end of the day, a one-for-one trade, still pretty decent. Keeps this game right at around a state of parity. The only real difference is maybe individual experience targets. A bit of a lead here or there for either the Scarabs or the Bolts. But we are starting to rapidly approach that critical mass for LASBRA, where this Susano, the damage output just getting a bit out of control.
Yeah, saw a big swing there in mid. First big punch from LASBRA here this game. Second to highest, third to highest on the damage charts, where SCaryD has really controlled the solo lane. Hunter builds differing a bit here in this game as well. Kind of typical anti-heal crit tree for BaRRaCCuDDa on the Cupid, who has kicked back, remained just fine over there on the dual lane with the one-level lead. Devour's Gauntlet, Exi, Odibo for Yark. So different mindset between the two.
Yeah, just essentially the two meta builds on display. Standard crit versus the yellow numbers build. I think the Solar Scarab's probably right to look towards a bit more AoE. The Odysseus bow should find some value when you're really, really worried about LASBRA's ability to just blink in, ultimate, and send 4 people flying with massive damage. So having something that can keep that in check from a range, I think will find some value as Jarcorrr starts to finish off that item. Worth noting, Witchblade in the second slot for Hurriwind as well. Deal some of these auto attackers on the Olympus Bolts. BaRRaCCuDDa and Ven going to be a little bit worse for wear. Even Baskin to a certain extent, who hasn't decided to go for the Shogun's Gusari. A bit of a departure from the standard, because they've got it elsewhere.
They got Jake.
Jake's got the Shogun's Gusari. Frostbite passive finds value, but he's got to think Baskin would be in that front line just as often and probably benefit from it a little bit more.
I mean, I feel like we've seen double Shoguns, but
we have.
But I don't know if Baskin immediately looking towards that item. So if it's going to happen, it's going to happen later. For now, Jake will be providing that value to both Ven and BaRRaCCuDDa. We're going to have very close respawn timers on both of these neutral objectives. The Scarabs happy to trade out the Pyromancer last time. And remember, the Shred is just going to get better for the Bolts with these double Hunters just melting down their targets. And I wonder if the Bolts maybe consider playing around right a little bit more. Force the hand of the Solar Scarabs, maybe not sensing the Scarabs are feeling comfortable pulling the Primal Fury in retaliation. It's an interesting game of chess starting to build up here when the margins are so razor thin.
Yeah, I've actually kind of talked myself into it as I was thinking through it. If Jake is going to play a more passive role in the team fights, trying to initiate from a range with these walls and then play around his ADCs, Shogun's Gusari passive going to your ADCs probably feels a bit better. Hurriwind showing how tanky he really is now. Holds on to that Phantom Shell, unconcerned with the wall. The Olympus Bolts, though, similarly, in a pretty good position. Pull out the Primal Fury. Ven's pretty low in the back, though.
Here's your big fight. 16 minutes in, game even. Primal Fury pulled. It's a freeze onto Hurriwind. Fields of Love down, and Hurriwind shrugs it off, but Baskin now reinitiates. The Atlas out of the fight. No kill, but no support for a little while for the Solar Scarabs. Bad out of hell. Used for some chase down here by SCaryD. Yark also doesn't have ultimate. Olympus Bolts maybe favor themselves now, just an ultimate economy.
And they should. The Solar Scarabs pull the Primal Fury, maybe thinking SCaryD would be able to, I suppose, pull the attention of the Olympus Bolts, but Scary doesn't want to stick around in that fight without his ultimate available. Bolts now stepping back forward, and it's going quick.
Gonna have to be a steal again. by the Solar Scarabs. Steal attempt again, rather. Fear no
Nice
evil, it's on
hold.
the back line. 3 sets of beads off the Olympus Bolts. It's massive from SMITE, but somehow not big enough. The Olympus Bolts get the Primal Fury as well. It's devastating now for the Solar Scarabs. Ven takes some chunk damage. It's Baskin who takes the Fury away, and it's the rest of the Bolts chasing down the Solar Scarabs to finish the fight.
BaRRaCCuDDa trying to limp away, has to use that shell, heads up into the air, gets him a couple of feet, and just far enough out of the aggro range of the Olympus Bolts. Talk about a terrible situation for the Solar Scarabs. What was a very strong initiation from SMITE looks real good. What was that, a 4-man ultimate?
3 beads,
Yeah,
perfectly
3
in
beads,
sync.
perfectly in sync, but nobody in range to follow up, because what are the rest of the Solar Scarabs doing? They've pulled the Gold Fury. They're just using that time while SMITE is zoning to put DPS into the objective so the Olympus Bolts could simply walk up and take it. It was very casual from the Bolts there. They were essentially handed a 5 versus 2, and then they get to walk in, take the gold, and now SMITE's life as well.
Oh my goodness.
Talk about pulling a Panatom, just accosting the enemy jungler on the right-hand side. The Olympus Bolts, I mean, that's a massive swing for them, and it wasn't particularly difficult.
No, now LASBRA's reached the point that you were worried about, where you've gotten Jotun's Crusher, Heartseeker, massive power spike for this Susano. Squishies beware, LASBRA's on the hunt. So Baskin will take a bit of damage here, but this is more just set up for Baskin. A dazzling offensive onto Hurriwind, a Phantom Shell needed to get this Atlas out of the fight. So at least a Phantom Shell early. We were begging for them yesterday. Get 1 already for Hurriwind. A couple opportunities if that's where BaRRaCCuDDa and Jarcorrr want to go with their relic upgrades. But I wondered if that would be the big pivot point here in game number 1. And it could be for the Bolts if they have now cleaned up their late mid-game, their early late game, and really compounding this gold lead, because 3,000+, a fantastic spot for the Bolts to be in.
And I think the Olympus Bolts, even just by composition and relic selection, have simplified their objective play, which had tended to be a weakness in some of their previous sets. Now with Bracer and Frenzy on Jake, Shogun's Kusari as well, double Hunter composition. Find one more pick. The Olympus Bolts are going to walk directly to the Fire Giant, and it won't last very long. The Solar Scarabs need to play very, very cautiously on the map. I would have loved to have seen them try and do something despite losing out of that fight within the last 2 minutes, just because SMITE had done so much work with that Fear No Evil. That work is slipping away. 9 seconds till all the beads are back up.
Need to see a bit more out of Jarcorrr over the next few minutes. Climbing up the damage
there it
charts a
is.
bit now. Poking down damage onto Awesome Jake. Dueling Dragons, good from BaRRaCCuDDa this time. Yark is knocked up by the Typhoon. There's no re-follow up there from the Olympus Bolt. So Jake, a clean pick onto the Ymir. Falls prey to an overextension death, maybe more than any other god in the game. Really just what the doctor ordered for the Scarabs. You give yourself a bit of breathing room for the next 15, 20 seconds.
Yeah, I think Jake spends all his gold upgrading those relics, doesn't realize how squishy he really is with just 2 items. So that damage output from Jarcorrr maybe catches them off guard a bit. It was so fast. 5-6 auto attacks in the blink of an eye, and 80% of your HP immediately afterward. Was a good response from Jake, though, to channel the Shards of Ice so you're not affected by the Wild Hunt. Regardless, you're standing still in front of an ADC, though, so Jarcorrr doesn't really have to stop his DPS whatsoever. Solar Scarab stepping up. Good luck, Baskin's got ult.
Baskin walks away from the pull-in from Hurriwind. Little chunk damage flies in from Baskin and BaRRaCCuDDa as well. BaRRaCCuDDa really hurts at this point in the game. Double crit and what tends to be a death bringer after those two. So the Bolt's in a nice spot, not only, of course, gold, experience, all that we've talked about, but they've been able to diversify, to your earlier point, Myth, the type of damage that their ADCs are going to be doing. Ven is going to shred down some tanks with the kin size. BaRRaCCuDDa is going to get the big crit numbers later on in this game. Makes itemization pretty difficult as far as where you're going to prioritize. Could be another catch-out, though, on Awesome Jake. This would be another big win for the Solar Scarabs, but you have to be careful of the bait. It's what the Bolts are really good at doing. ScarAD on the flip side trades out his ultimate and over half of his HP, and right around the Fire Giant, can't give the Bolts any time alone with the FG.
Yeah, Jake able to make his way back to base, pick up another sentry, so should be able to reestablish vision control of the Fire Giant pit itself. And it's an expensive pick attempt from the Solar Scarabs. Cost you bat out of hell, Hurriwind's ultimate, but namely, it's that Sunder, the Sunder that Hurriwind has picked up for himself. That's your primary way of dealing with the front line of the Olympus Bolts. now without it for another 70 some odd seconds. I think the Bolts might just group up and try and force that fight. And now with Wild Hunt down as well. Yeah, I mean, I would. You got 3 ultimates down on the side of the Scarabs.
And I'm not sure now who's taking beads off of any of the Olympus Bolts. I mean, SMITE, you could hit a ridiculous Fear No Evil, just like he did around the Gold Fury, but the beads were perfectly in sync from the Bolts. They're sitting there and they're ready to go. BaRRaCCuDDa then maybe for some follow-up, but that Wild Hunt, maybe Hurriwind gets a pull in. Phantom Shell gets a little bit of value, ends up getting frozen just on the other side of the wall. Bolt's not feeling aggressive enough to just pull the Fire Giant in the face of the Solar Scarabs. Remember, Gold Fury also up on the left side of the map, and you'll have a Pyromancer here shortly. But it's just such awkward territory for the Solar Scarabs. You'd love to get some of this neutral farm. It just feels like all these waves pushing against you. And again, you can't leave the Bolts alone for all that long. So the gold is not necessarily building up for the Solar Scarabs in all this downtime. Fortunately for the Scarabs, they may not have control of the Fire Giant Pit's vision, but they've got good periphery vision. They realize now that the Olympus Bolts have finally started to work their way in, which is why we see the significant grouping. Jake's been quick on the wall, but Hurriwind, remember, no Phantom Shell, and he's got no chance. LASBRA's found the back line. Now the Susano can swing, but Laz so low. BaRRaCCuDDa from over the wall finishes off the kill, and suddenly the Solar Scarabs with some life. Baskin body blocked by the back line of the Scarabs. And the Solar Scarabs winning this trade so far. BaRRaCCuDDa and Jake kiting backwards away from SCaryD, and there will be a collapse in from Baskin. There's no bat out of hell, but also no chase. The Solar Scarabs down big in gold. Win a 2-for-1 fight.
Just a massive commitment from the Olympus Bolts to shut down Hurriwind. Successful, but it was a 1-3 Atlas when you're allowing the rest of the Solar Scarabs to free cast. BaRRaCCuDDa comes up massive for his team, double dueling Dragon's Pull, uses the shell to save Jarcorr's life, failing the shell, gets in there and uses his own life to save Jarcorr's life, sacrificing his own HP for the ADC. A massive performance from BaRRaCCuDDa, and one that was much needed for the Solar Scarabs. Closes up a bit of that gold lead. Nab yourself a Gold Fury as well. It won't go unanswered. Pyromancer by the Olympus Bolts should be an easy pickup just to mitigate some of that gold swing. But regardless, the Scarabs are now in a much, much better position than they were previously.
They were, and BaRRaCCuDDa has skyrocketed up the damage charts as well. That dueling Dragons was fantastic in setting up a fight and then finishing off the kill from over the wall onto LASBRA. Yark might have had an auto attack to get it done, but this would be bad for the Solar Scarabs. SCaryD caught out without Bat Out of Hell. And now you've lost your solo laner for a minute, and you're a team on the Bolts that can shred this FG. You're favoring yourself immediately in this fight. And they've pulled it quickly. 40 seconds to play with. All they need to do is generate threat and force the Scarabs in, or maybe just go for the confirm. It's low. Hurriwind, Phantom Shell used. SMITE soloed by LASBRA. This is the fight the Bolts have been looking for. Fire Giant +4, but Yark gets the fadeaway onto Ven. So Fire Giant on 4, +4 for the Olympus Bolts, and a big turnaround now. They were ahead and finally able to crack the case. Just a tough situation, man. Why is SCaryD up there alone? That's an unforced error. The Solar Scarabs now have to defend the Fire Giant, realizing the Olympus Bolts starting to generate that lead with fire. Would really start to balloon out of control, step up to defend, lose their lives synchronously. There's really nothing they could do about it now. Left side Phoenix, or right side rather, should just fall down if BaRRaCCuDDa's allowed a free cast. I mean, SCaryD respawns, goes back in, loses that damage trade. LASBRA solos Sam, so now that matchup is tilted over to the Bolts once the itemization has gotten there for the Susano. Feels like a couple unforced errors this game from the Solar Scarabs have really made a difference. SCaryD getting picked over by FG. And a catch out or 2 on this Atlas. I mean, 5 deaths for Hurriwind, not all 5 are really egregious. LASBRA sends out Typhoon, doesn't get much with it. That's lucky. Had LASBRA just landed that pull, SMITE likely just dead without Fear No Evil to peel for himself. Would have been a great opening for the Olympus Bolts to continue their siege all the way across the map, especially considering they come up empty on that right side bird. I think they're still, the Olympus Bolts, in a position where they could just continue to siege regardless. Double Hunter composition means that these towers, very, very easy to knock down. Odysseus bow finish for Ven, so he can use that sniper stance on Ishtar and just poke damage from a range, maybe control
the initiation factor of Sanford Soccer a little bit more so. The Solar Scarabs' base defense is not poor, but it's high execution. I think you have to ask of BaRRaCCuDDa to find another phenomenal ultimate. It's got to be 1 or 2 key targets with that dueling dragons if you really want to find the Olympus Bolts, find a pick in some of these fights. But the Bolts are a team that have in the past played with immense patience. Might just try and split the map here, stop the Solar Scarabs from farming, and get ready as they start to approach these Phoenixes.
Well, game 2 against the Warriors the other day was a bit funky, but the Bolts in game 3 felt very, very calm and consistent in closing out that game in that set. Baskin's going to get pulled in.
It's a good poke.
Great poke. But remember, slow sustain up for this Olympus Bolts team. Plenty of time remaining, but this is the only side of the map that the Olympus Bolts are going to feel confident sieging, because all the other waves pushing against the Bolts. The Solar Scarabs just have to turn their eyes towards this left Phoenix. Could make the job easier. Watch out. Here's the dueling dragons.
Yikes.
And there it goes. No connection in the back line. Goes Baskin, and he's got eyes for BaRRaCCuDDa, who glides away. Sanford Soccer narrowly escapes, and the damage is huge from the Solar Scarabs. Somehow, they've stayed in this fight, but Ven has revved the engine. A double kill, flips it around, far from clean from either team. But the Solar Scarabs able to repel the Bolts, but they do lose their left side Phoenix in tow.
Absolutely astounded that Sanford Soccer is able to limp his way out of there. It was just a, I'm done fighting, turn around, turn on my heel, walkout style escape. It's not as if he had to leap an ultimate or utilize some CC immunity or even really put on juke shoes. It was a step up from Scary D that spooks off the Olympus Bolts. Sam, Cardinal Sin, man, I get it. Junglers want speed, but sometimes you got to be willing to let them go.
I mean, if he dies here, which he should.
It's not an if.
Should. There you go. LASBRA gets it. It's like the 3rd or 4th this game where one player on the Scarabs has gotten picked.
Blunders.
And it has totally changed the dynamic of the match. I mean, the one by the Fire Giant gives FG to the Bolts. I don't know if this one totally breaks anything open. The Fire Giant just now falls off, but allows for more simple setup for the Bolts, I suppose. And really denies Sam uptime to get gold into the back pocket. Be a free Oni Fury as well. So Oni Fire minions on the left side of the map. And a Fire Giant respawning in 40 seconds. Again, I don't know how devastating that individual pick is onto Sam, but I think Myth more just tells a story of the way that this game has gone for the Scarabs.
Yeah, just very strange decisions across the board so far this game. It starts with that dash in from Hurriwind to the duo lane, unforced error there. Maybe a couple of strange picks around the Fire Giant. Scary D playing behind the pin on his own. Now Sanford Soccer going for the speed buff play. The Olympus Bolts have been given opportunities, maybe not that last one, as you said, but given opportunities that really were just handed to them. I think given maybe the operative word there. Now the Olympus Bolts, with a good deal of time, can reestablish defensive positioning around the Fire Giant, get some ward advantage, and prepare as it starts to barrel back down towards the battleground. Worth noting, Sanford Soccer, no beads for 40 seconds, but still the primary initiator.
EFG the target. Frenzy used. Olympus Bolts confirm the enhanced Fire Giant, and BaRRaCCuDDa in no man's land, now deleted by the Olympus Bolts after they get EFG.
What?
And what does this now hand over to the Bolts? Because think about it, BaRRaCCuDDa has been doing so much damage in these fights. Now off the map, and the Scarabs lose a good bit of their poke.
Yeah, BaRRaCCuDDa, I suppose, thinks he's a frontliner. Walks up,
Oh,
Sanford
no.
Soccer, don't let it happen again.
Oh, it's gonna happen, all right. LASBRA runs down Sam. And the Scarabs just never got a look at a base defense here in this game. They got one on the left side, they lost their Phoenix. But this Titan is gonna get walked at by the Olympus Bolts with only 3 members of the Scarabs left standing. This is gonna have to be the play of all time to save this game, and it's not gonna happen, and the Bolts wipe out the Scarabs in game 1.
Yeah, I mean, the Scarabs look good at points. The team fights when they were actually fighting as a team looked pretty decent, but other than that, just a bit of difficulty finding opportunities to group up. It just felt like past that 20-minute mark, the Solar Scarabs were like, all right, we got to make hero plays. Every single one of us, we all need to be heroes.
Yep.
Be a team. That's all you need to do to at least test the Olympus Bolts.
I was wondering with this Bolts team, you know, the first half of Phase 3 was brutal for this squad.
It was.
Lost a lot of 3-game sets, weren't beating many, if any, of the teams in the top half of the league. Finally get a couple of wins, string them together against the Oni Warriors. I wondered if that would be the springboard that this Bolts team needed to start getting something going here towards the end of Phase 3. And at least as far as Game 1 goes here against the Scarabs, felt like the game plan was pretty clear, played this composition wonderfully. And you mentioned, some big pivot points. Once LASBRA hits the itemization, once the double hunters really start to come online, the objectives are going to be toast, and the carries are going to be toast in LASBRA's case. And the Bolts play this one very, very well. So a couple blunders from the Scarabs, but a well-executed game plan from the Bolts gives the Olympus Bolts a win here in game number 1. Game 2 between the Bolts and the Scarabs coming up next.
I don't wanna care, it's a little unfair that I'll never not care about you. And I don't wanna say, but the second that I wait, no, the words can't get to you. We push and we pull, it's wrong and it's right, it's not black and white. But I know that we'll always be something golden. It's only worth taking to make it. If you took a little time to open up, to see my love, to see my love. It's only worth taking to make it. If you took a little time to open up, to see my love, to see my I don't wanna care, it's a little unfair that you'll never not care for me. I was always scared, no, I couldn't be prepared for you just to be a memory. We push and we pull, it's wrong and it's right, it's not black and white. But I know that we'll always be something golden. It's only worth taking to make it. If you took a little time to open up, to see my love, to see my love.
Hello and welcome back to the SMITE Pro League. Game number 1 goes to the Olympus Bolts between them and the Solar Scarabs. And if you want to support the Bolts, the Scarabs, or any of your favorite SMITE Pro League teams, I mean, we got the World Championships just around the corner in January in Arlington. If you want to have a jersey to represent your team there, well, then go on over and take a jersey from our friends over at Skill. Well, don't take one. Make sure you give them some money, and then they can take your money and you can get yourselves a nice jersey as well. Shop.hi-rezstudios.com/SPL. To get your hands on one of these fantastic jerseys brought to us by our good friends over at Skill. So take yourself over to that website and pick up one of those so you can rep your favorite team, whether it just be in the comfort of your own home or if you join us in the SMITE World Championships in Arlington. Best way to represent your teams. Thank you so much for Skulls for providing not just our players but our fans at homes the new jerseys for Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. And game number 1 of this matchup specifically, Charlie, I mean, this one was one that started out really well for the Scarabs. I mean, they were able to find an early pick over on towards Baskin, keep him down a little bit, make sure that ScarAD got a lead. But as this game kept going on, it started to rise some of the problems that we've seen of the Scarabs of past, which was once they start getting these leads, they kind of start walking in one by one, these awkward picks that start randomly happening. ScarAD gets picked off, BaRRaCCuDDa gets grabbed at a jungle randomly, and because of that, they never really get a true 5v5 for some of these team fights. Yeah, I'm going to echo a little bit of what Mifflin said. The Solar Scarabs looked great in parts of that game. It just seemed like, as you were saying, they sort of, once it got a little bit later, started, you know, as you were just walking up, getting picked off, they weren't able to mount a true 5v5 defense ever because they could never be 5 strong. It was not a team fight. It was, they were always fighting a man down because of that. And I think, you know, the Scarabs are really solid at getting those early leads. You know, they're able to find it. It was just what happened after the fact, the objective fights. They did drop a few Fire Giants, you know, a Gold Fury as well. It's just, it really started to add up and towards this late game. And that's what I was thinking about. The Olympus Bolts comp looked like it really did succeed in the late game with this double Hunter Amaterasu. And it did exactly what you would want this comp to do, and it just shredded through the front line of the Solar Scarabs. A couple of moments as well with an objective steal. I believe Baskin was able to grab one. At some point it was over, I think it was a Gold Fury a little bit earlier on into the game. And then just moments like these where nothing's really going on and it just ends up turning into 1v1s between different players. LASBRA obviously coming out on top from that one. BaRRaCCuDDa kind of getting picked off at the very end of the game. Again, made it to where it's almost impossible for the Scarabs to fight back in. So strong for the Olympus Bolts to be able to find those picks, to be able to find that success. Especially the fact that ScarAD, who has been, or not ScarAD, for Baskin, who has been a pivotal player in some of the more recent sets they've had, who has been one of those players to be able to step up and be that front line for his squad, to kind of be that new voice for the team. Whenever he goes down a little bit early, you kind of wonder, is there a little bit of panic for the Bolts? So it's good on them to be able to rally back through and kind of stand behind some of their veterans in Venenu, in BaRRaCCuDDa once these late games started coming through. Yeah, Baskin has been real fun to watch, especially with these auto attack style warriors, the Amaterasus, things like that. But, you know, Ven was locking down with the Ishtar, you know, found a couple depths, I think, was one of the main targets of the aggression from the Solar Scarabs. But this Ishtar is able to do so much damage depending on how you decide to build her. It really is something that I imagine the Solar Scarabs don't want to deal with. You know, I wouldn't say ban the Ishtar, I'm not saying that much, but, you know, trying to put more pressure towards the Ishtar, unfortunately, wasn't able to work in Ven. I think Ven's feeling good, wouldn't you say so? I'd say so. I'd say he's feeling pretty happy right now. Do you think he even has music on, or if that's just like the soundtrack? Nah, for sure he's got music on. No way he's just dancing to nothing right now. No, he might be. I am now. It's infectious. Yeah, it's now starting to spread over to the desk as well. We don't even hear the music that he's got going on, but for the Olympus Bolts kind of moving in towards game number 2, we can jump into the picks and bans for that game to see what adjustments do get made by either of these two teams. And as far as the drafts were concerned, didn't really feel like there was anything kind of egregious on either sides that maybe needs to be adjusted out. It really did feel like it came mostly down to a play on field, Charlie. So for the Solar Scarabs in game number 2, do you think any change-ups need to be made for their draft? I don't think the changes in the draft were the issue. You know, we saw many times where they were just a little bit out of position. The objective play wasn't as tight as it should have been, and also just the, you know, fighting a man down, that sort of thing. So for me, the comp doesn't have to change, it's just how it was played. If the Solar Scarabs find that something else needs to change, which I guess they don't, because they're just going to run back 3 LASBRA bans once again, probably the smart call. I like this call because I think, you know, that they realize it wasn't any one thing about our comp that really was the issue. It was just how we played it. And if we did make those little mistakes, our team fight late game would have looked a lot cleaner. So running back the Cernunnos, I don't hate this at all. Wonder if we, now it's very, very rare. I think like counting on less than one hand, the number of times we've had true full 10 God salty run backs from teams We've seen some where it's one team but not the other. We've seen some where it's 9 out of 10 gods that have been as a full run back, but we'll see if that ends up happening. For now, the only adjustment that's been made on the Olympus Bolts side has been picking up Susano earlier in the draft, so taking, or at least not prioritizing the Ymir right away for Awesome Jake, instead making sure that LASBRA gets his pick very early on alongside that Cupid.
Yeah, we'll have to see. The Solar Scarabs want to grab that Atlas once again, or if they want to throw Hurriwind onto something different. I mean, there is 2 great Guardians open at the moment in Ymir and the BaRRaCCuDDa, both picks that I feel Hurriwind is probably going to want to go to, or at least would like to go to, especially into the matchup of Cupid and Susano. You get some great value out of those walls. But thinking about this one, so if it was going to be the full salty run back, you'd think it would just be the insta-lock, right? The Solar Scarabs would just be ready. And since they're thinking about this one, I imagine there's going to be some adjustments here. Whether that be in the duo lane, or whether that be just, you know, maybe grabbing BaRRaCCuDda's pick earlier. He does, you know, the Huang, he was doing a fair bit of damage, but I think as it got a little bit later, you know, getting picked off, things like that, wasn't able to find the true initiation. And grabbing the Thor, that's a change that I like to see. BaRRaCCuDDa on the Thor, always a pleasure to watch. He likes to get active early, and there's 2 great matchups already. Cupid and Susano, no CC immune ults. If you're starting Blink on that Susano, you always have a great target with the Anvil of Dawn. As well as that Ymir, the Solar Scarabs, they're out for blood in the early.
Ymir going to be good at potentially shutting down the Cupid and the Susano from being able to escape in a fight. Now, potentially forcing out at least a Phantom Shell for the side of the Olympus Bolts with that pickup there. Between double wall, one from Thor and one from Ymir. And I think you're right to highlight that Thor from Sam. It's been a pick that he's gone back to time and time again over the years throughout his career, whether it be his time back in the Amateur League or his time in the Pro League. Now it's the Olympus Bolts. Was wondering where the support option was going to go once this Ymir was taken away. It seems that it'll be Nox, something that Awesome Jake has gone to many a times in the past. Though as of recent, this pick hasn't seen too much play. I think it only showed about 7 games played at the time. But it's one, at least for Awesome Jake, that he has gone to multiple times throughout the year.
Yeah, it's one of those picks that it's not fun to watch, but hey, Jake likes it, and he's able to lock down a lot of the members of the Solar Scarabs with it, so it should work out just fine. Notably, the Ymir wall does stop a lot of what Nox wants to do, especially with going for objective steals and things like that. So a decent matchup there, at least for Hurriwind. As we go into the second wave of bans, ScarAD not going to be able to take that Camazotz again. That's going to be taken away here. And what exactly are the Solar Scarabs look? Are they assuming that Ven's going to take another Hunter? I imagine that would be the call, right? So because they already have some decent magical damage in the Nox, I would think the Vulcan is going to be taken away, and then I wouldn't be surprised if the Ishtar was coming up right next.
Ishtar, Poseidon if they want to stick within the magical realm as well. A lot of options available for the Scarabs and the Bolts to both ban away. Taking that Camazotz from ScarAD, something he was able to get off to a pretty strong start early on, even got an advantage over Baskin in the solo lane with that pick. The Bolts are taking their time on their ban. Still need solo, still need either mid or Hunter. Again, last time around we thought this, at least for the Cernunnos, we thought that one was going to be going over to mid for BaRRaCCuDDa, and then got a quick flip of the script at the end and ended up being the Huang going his way. So I wonder if maybe that even opens up, because this Huang has kind of been the answer as of recent to kind of answering to, you know, a lot of this aggressive, a lot of this very high CC style of pick. The Huang has kind of snuck his way back into the playing field for a few different players.
Can I just say, you know, in game number 1, I sort of thought it was a fluke, but it is going to be just a full set where AMC just doesn't even get looked at. Like, and again, at game number 1, I was like, okay, they just don't value AMC here, and this time around, they still do not care about that early pressure. Ishtar, a little bit more valuable in that slot for the Bolts, and because Jarc, I mean, he had a good game, but I think he hovered the on her, and he hovered the Danza. Those are 2 ADCs that you'd think you want to look for a 1v1 situation. You want to try and fight. Of course, the switch was, okay, I'll just take the Cernunnos, but I imagine Jarc wants to fight. You know, he wants to take BaRRaCCuDDa in the early and try and find those level 5 engagements, that sort of thing. But it looks like the Poseidon is going to be the ban there. So all the Hunters that Ben would want to play is going to be available at the moment. I'm curious, though, is that something that Ben wants to take? Because, again, the Ishtar is available, and I've got no problems with him running it back. It was a great performance.
So far, 2 games that Venenu has been able to play that pick. It's worked out very well for him. We look back just at that previous game, and then we look back all the way to the Oni Warriors game where he went 4-1 and 5 on that pick. So it's definitely something that he has become comfortable with, and Hunters in general is something that the Bolts have been fine with running in towards that mid lane. But it will be Artio instead. So grabbing a pick for Baskin early on. So Artio is something that was very popular for a while, seen some fall-offs, seen some change-ups specifically in this phase, has been making its way more often towards support, but now moving us back over into the solo lane.
Yeah, they have a lot of CC and a lot of lockdown the bolts.
Yeah.
Don't envy the position the Solar Scarabs are in trying to go against it, because if SMITE wants to lead in with an Anvil of Dawn, something like that, you better have beads. If not, you're getting, you know, the cripple field from Artio, knock silenced, and of course BaRRaCCuDDa's got the Fields of Love as well. It's going to be very difficult to try and traverse that. So I imagine single target picks, probably the name of the game, at least for the early. Chulainn locked in here for SCARY-D. That is going to bring a little bit of pressure over in that lane. But because I saw the Chulainn, I assumed a mage would come through, and it looks like it's going to be Jarcorrr on the Freya. That is certainly a character that can take those 1v1 trades. I mean, as long as you have Valkyrie's Discretion, you're not worried about Fields of Love. And then you're probably just winning the boxing trade, assuming you have some items online. I think Jarcorrr is probably going to try to get aggressive in that lane. But, as we expected, Vent's more than happy to just take that Ishtar last pick. It's going to bring tons of damage, as well as the Bolts have cemented a great early game with that Susano, and their late game is going to be looking just fine as well.
So it'll be a Hunter v Hunter in mid, and Susano and Thor. Now, talk to me kind of about the early 2v2 that we could potentially see there in that regard. I mean, I know we've been seeing a lot of these junglers start rotating over towards the dual lane, try and get that early interceptor pressure, try and get the dual lane maybe ahead a little bit. But how does that mid 2v2 look between kind of adding the Susano and Ishtar versus a Thor Cernunnos?
Well, it's interesting because, you know, the Interceptor is always powerful, but you could also just go to the opposite side of the map and grab the Totem if you fear that 3v3, I suppose. And if you value your 2v2 over in solo, which if you got an Artio, I'm assuming you do, that could be the call there for LASBRA, just fight over solo lane, try and put some pressure on a SCARY-D. I think Chulainn, always a decent target for a gank. You know, with that Rage transformation, doesn't really have a leap, does have a dash, but you can just pull him away pretty easily with that Susano. So, could be the call either way. With Assassin, Hunter in both of these roles, there's not going to be too much room for fighting. I think Sam, if he's not initiating with his ult with Anvil of Dawn, he's probably not looking for a 1v1 trade. You can 100 to 0 Susano, but you better be landing that ultimate to do so. Whereas LASBRA has free reign. He doesn't have to ult in to get aggressive. He could just blink, go for a pull, and then he's able to 100 to 0 you with those auto cancels as well. So I think the Bolt's probably more in tune to try and fight early. Sam's going to be waiting for level 5 and looking to look at the side lanes more than likely.
So then as we kind of start pushing towards this late game, Solar Scarabs have a lot of AoE control in that regard. They've got the wall to kind of block off the path. And I mean, when you look over at the side of the Bolts, there's not really anybody who can deal with that wall outside of a Phantom Shell Trail. I mean, I think maybe Ishtar the only one, and I think she would have to expend her dash to then go over the wall backwards in order to make it at that point. So for the Olympus Bolts, I mean, how important is picking up one, if not maybe multiple Phantom Shells to try and deal with what the Scarabs have drafted?
I mean, it's easy. Jake just goes into Ven and then says, take me over the wall, and then we leave the rest of the team behind because we don't need them. But, you know, I think they're probably going to have like 3 shells anyways, 2 of them Fortify, 1 of them Phantom, maybe 2 Phantoms. If you're that worried about the walls, you're going to be looking to get aggressive on this Ymir, because Hurriwind's going to be the first one into the fight and the last one out. I'm thinking he might just die.
Well, Solar Scarabs need to make a comeback here in game number 2 if they want to keep their hopes alive in this set. Are the Olympus Bolts going to run away with it in 2? We'll find out all that and more with Dolson and Mifflin for our second game.
Bolts fans want to see this team keep rolling. Scarabs fans need to see some life here. You're talking mathematical, number crunching type things. Gormizer, unfortunately, is gone. Can't do all of that for us right now. Very, very difficult for the Solar Scarabs to jump out of that bottom 2 and avoid missing Phase 3 playoffs if you end up losing this set. The gap just going to build up with the Olympus Bolts and the rest of the league. Not impossible if the Solar Scarabs lose this set, but it's going to require crazy, crazy turnaround, win and loss streaks from different teams. Destiny ends up getting taken out of your hands a bit if you're the Scarabs. Now, if you're the Bolts here, Miff, you're kind of sticking with a similar composition. You've traded out the Ymir for the Nox. You've traded out the Amaterasu for the Artio. And if you're the Scarabs, you've traded out your standard start for Hurriwind invading green buff. It'll get dropped by the Bolts. Hurriwind uses sprint.
He should be okay.
It should be all right, but how interesting! What we're used to purple buff invades for the supports, and it looks like Jake is just going to try to delay out Hurriwind, trying to get back to lane.
This is possibly the most unfun thing for either support.
Yeah.
At least Jake got a little bit of farm, you know, but having to play goaltender to Hurriwind, just being obnoxious in the jungle, probably not exactly what Jake would have chosen for himself had he got to decide. what happens throughout the early portions of this game. I mean, it's certainly a strong strategy, right? What Hurriwind accomplishes is he forces a 3 split on the green. He wastes Jake's time, and he makes sure that Jarcorrr gets a whole lot of solo farm. And getting your Freya solo farm, that's your late game win condition.
Never a bad thing. Ven with the root onto BaRRaCCuDDa. So some scrap potential with the Ishtar early. BaRRaCCuDDa on the Cern will miss that last auto attack. Health-wise, actually, BaRRaCCuDDa ends up looking a bit worse for wear. A little life steal in the kit, though. Top off that health bar over time. Important whoop there for Yark. Otherwise, follow-up would have made its way into Hurriwind. Man, these junglers scrapping over in mid. SMITE didn't get the disengaged memo. And the Olympus Bolts and LASBRA hand deliver it. First blood to the Bolts.
Not a start you want to see for your Thor. I mean, I'll tell you that much pretty easily. Thor really does have a strong level 2. That passive means you're hitting a little bit harder than the enemy jungler. You don't pick Thor for a slow early game. BaRRaCCuDDa walks in here. You know Ven's there, right?
BaRRaCCuDDa avoids getting locked in place. I was wondering if that was just going to get turned on to BaRRaCCuDDa. I thought Laz and Ven were going to just turn around and delete BaRRaCCuDDa, who did have beads. But playing on the edge, able to stay alive. And nonetheless, a good start. Remember, game 1, we were talking about LASBRA, and okay, look, it's going to need a little bit of time to get going. Wait until the items are there later on in the game. Laz is going to slam, and we got there eventually. And so first blood for Susano. A little bit of extra gold. Just moves that timeline up a bit. Now, this was the game plan for the Scarabs heavily in game 1. Invade Baskin's side of the map constantly. Blue buffs dropped on cooldown. And this one, no different. Scarabs and SMITE maybe feel like they've got the ability to pressure out the solo lane.
Unfortunate circumstances makes LASBRA a little bit too weak to actually fight at that blue buff. SMITE full HP and mana because he's coming back from base. Right. You know, sent there in a body bag, but comes back from base nonetheless. LASBRA had to stick around, take that fight around that right-hand side, so not healthy enough to actually contest the blue. I think Artio should still be all right, especially with Baskin going down the silver breastplate build. Also has gone for teleport, so won't be too bad. Not too worse for wear, I think, in the laning phase for the next couple of moments. But second verse, same as the first, in that I'd like to see the Olympus Bolts show up to the next rotation of blue buff. Let's make sure Baskin isn't left alone on an island too much. In game 1, he fell, what was it, 2.5 levels behind just because the Solar Scarabs really did like the pressure they could put there. I imagine the Scarabs, seeing a bit of success in game 1 with it, will try and do the exact same thing here in game 2.
Baskin had a momentary advantage just because he had been able to go back and buy up some items, but Scarabs now teleport back into lane. Conduit Gem helping out Baskin for sure. Up against a Chulainn, which Myth we have not seen a lot of, but as Hurriwind walks forward, I don't know if Jake's in trouble here. No, he'll walk out. Haven't seen a lot of Chulainn, but does play that in-your-face, aggressive, King Arthur, Achilles type of game. You get the transformation, and you just want to run it down. And Scarabs, very good on this pick in the past.
LASBRA looks to pull out BaRRaCCuDDa a little bit off the mark.
Ooh.
Here is a 2v2. It teases us in the duo lane. Dashes out means there's not much you can do about it. Hurriwind maybe could have used wall there to catch one of them. Maybe some pressure out, but with beads available to just about everybody on the Bolts and Horrific still up for Jake. Not certain there's a whole lot of kill pressure there. SMITE has finally ticked over to level 5. I think he's got a pretty good opportunity to either force the fight here on blue if LASBRA groups up on it. LASBRA probably just going to keep his eyes on this Thor, though. Otherwise, Ven's got to play safe in mid. Ishtar struggles against that ult.
Scarabs jumped on double stun from Sam. This is great from the Scarabs, but the damage hasn't followed up. Anvil of Dawn. Is that headed towards Laz? No, it's the up down from Sam. And Ven with the stun, the dash for the auto attack. He's getting it done all on his own, and he has stayed in this fight.
TP.
The Ishtar crushing early in this game. LASBRA with his second. And empty-handed yet again for the Solar Scarabs.
Man, I like the idea from the Scarabs there. You want to be able to play aggressively around that blue buff. You keep SMITE at a distance, but the second he's spotted out by LASBRA, that ultimate is no longer a surprise factor. Anvil of Dawn's not going to catch the Olympus Bolts off guard. LASBRA, Baskin step forward for the fight. You get a little bit too much value from that Susano ultimate for the Solar Scarabs to want to continue the engagement. And then afterward, the reinitiation and LASBRA using that third ability to chase out the hammer. Just so clean. The Bolts, they've stopped the Solar Scarabs. The Scarabs have been a bit one-note in their game plan so far this set. It's been a whole lot of solo side pressure, and it's pretty easy to figure out how to play against it. It's bring some numbers. Like, show up, put up a defense, and the Solar Scarabs crumble.
Unfortunate for me, too, because I love Thor.
God, I love Thor.
I was hoping, I was actually kind of wondering if this pick would start to, I was told that after wall change was going to be all Thor, all day.
Who told you that?
You told me, okay. You whispered in my ear the moment it came out on the patch notes. You said, Dave, watch out. It is only Thor from here on out.
I really thought, man.
You said pick ban 100. I was kidding. You never told me that, but
I did think it. I could have told you that.
No, there were some rumblings that made it seem like Thor was going to be the big pick. I've seen, I guess, increased play, but I don't think is turned into a world beater. Still hoping I get to see it at Worlds. One big Anvil of Dawn changes things around. That's what the Scarabs need at this point from SMITE. Can maybe help out onto Ven. Uses the CC immunity perfectly on the ultimate. Stays just fine. So Sam, not for a lack of trying, just hasn't been able to find it. ScarAD dove by the bolts, and the salmon leap away provides some safety.
Yeah, that is a tough situation to be ScarAD, and fortunately, used that ultimate very, very well. Survives that initiation. Had Baskin been able to get the root a little bit sooner, maybe. You're able to turn that one around, continue that chase out, especially with that Breastplate of Valor in the first slot, allowing you to tank that tower for as long as you could, but not able to do it.
We've been wanting this. This is what we've asked for, but we've wanted the kill to be finished. Baskin!
Yikes.
Double stuns and scurries away. A crumb more damage would have gotten a kill there for the Scarabs, but just hasn't been going their way. Heart Bomb detonates for damage. Valkyrie's Discretion, Fields of Love, doesn't trap Yark. And Jarcorrr on the other side of the map slithers away with red HP.
Okay, so karmas are in balance. Both teams escape narrowly with their lives. Nobody at fault for the Baskin drop kill. Maybe if Nox ultimate connects, we're just talking about a dead Jarcorrr right now, but even then, that's a difficult shot to land, especially in situations like that where you can juke around the tower. So, end of the day, maybe itemization, the difference maker there. One more item for either side, and you're finishing off either of those kills. But it's expensive. With SMITE being the only real playmaker as far as the composition is concerned at this portion of the game, you need the Thor to be making plays. And when he's landing dunks and still getting unrewarded for it, it's got to be a real frustrating situation to find yourself in. Yeah. Seems as if he's itemized to prevent that exact same situation from happening again. Foregoes the Jotun, says, look, I might not have Anvil of Dawn all the time, but when I do, it's going to deal some damage.
Yark now no beads, no Valkyrie's Discretion. BaRRaCCuDDa, no Fields of Love, but plenty
Good
of
wall.
damage. A nice wall from Hurriwind delays out the damage. And Yark again with red HP lives. Now SMITE on his way in. Helps out Freya, picking up a kill. And the Scarabs needed it badly. And a well-placed wall from Hurriwind delivers a kill to the Scarabs.
I mean, that wall was just perfect. Not only does it save Jarcorr's life, but it also just kind of puts them in a position, the Olympus Bolts, where they have to split up. Jake sticks around, tries to finish off that kill. BaRRaCCuDDa realizes, look, I can't auto through walls, try as I might, so I'm just going to go ahead and disengage. Separates the entirety of the fight, gives the Solar Scarabs a 3 versus 1. Great stuff, but what can you do with it, right? There's no buffs up on the map for you to invade. You're not really in a position where you can start looking at the Gold Fury, even though you've got great vision control around it. Scarabs just got to take that one pick and be content with it.
Just being more annoying than anything else. But I also think important, if you're Sam, to just see one go in. You know that you can grab a kill. This is good damage from Ven. We've seen this a few times, where Hurriwind or Sam or someone walks forward into lane against Ven, forces out the ultimate. We've also seen this a few times. Still no beads on Yark, but Jake and BaRRaCCuDDa choose not to double W key underneath the tier 1 tower. But there's a purple buff, potential invade. It won't happen on left, on right. SMITE up and down. My goodness, another red health bar escape.
Pyro as well,
but this
probably.
one, Miff, opens up the door to a Pyromancer.
Yeah, they'll pull that one out. Nobody nearby to defend. They're trying to defend themselves on the left-hand side. Hurriwind in some trouble.
Hurriwind into Shards of Ice, though. Is it going to happen again? Another disengaged fight.
Wow.
Where the damage doesn't connect onto Ymir. Now Jarcorrr swings away. Valkyrie's Discretion for the damage and the gap close. And again, a red health bar. This is unbelievable. I've not seen this many kills escape at red HP in a long, long time. The Pyromancer, unfortunately for it, will end up dropping. Fortunately for the Bolts, are the ones who grab it.
Just a major fumble there from BaRRaCCuDDa. Mistimes the
Surely.
wild hunt. Jarcorrr caught in the
There we
tower
go.
and taken down. Hurriwind could buy some time. A rotation from Sam. It's in the wings.
Sam does not have Anvil of Dawn. Horrific emblem used by Jake, and Sam wallops LASBRA.
They got this one too.
Speed with the sprint, and awesome Jake, the last bit of mana. Maybe just delays the inevitable. BaRRaCCuDDa, no
major
fields
whiff.
of love. And the caster's curse reigns supreme. Only one for the Scarabs on left.
Hey, only one, but still doubling up the kills they've got. So a good pick for the Solar Scarabs as the Olympus Bolts get a bit aggressive on that left-hand side. I like the idea, though, from LASBRA. Just slow down Jarcorrr. Realize that this Freya is the win condition for the Solar Scarabs, and anything you could do to take some gold out of her pocket, some experience away from her as well, certainly going to find some value. Jarcorrr still waiting to finish up that second item. Once he does, though, Jarcorrr that is, that ring really going to be a major power spike. Get some lifesteal online, give you an opportunity to start taking a bit more boxing matches up against BaRRaCCuDDa. We've seen it a couple times this game where they trade autos back and forth. BaRRaCCuDDa down to 50, Jarcorrr down to 50, and then BaRRaCCuDDa just backs up, autos the wave, heals up from hearts, and says, let's do it again. Jarcorrr has to head back.
Man, Cupid plus Ishtar for BaRRa and Ven respectively has turned into a very, very powerful combo for this Bolts team. Ven just looks so comfortable on this pick. A triple kill or two in the set the other day against the Oni Warriors has looked fantastic and disengaging over in mid. Hasn't had to use the beads hardly ever, has just been right on time with the ultimate. It has hit a lot of setup. Now can do more of the same onto Hurriwind. Sam is gonna go up. Hurriwind's gonna die in the meantime. Massive knockup from ScarAbs, and Sam is in range to follow up, but he's gotta leave. He simply doesn't have the damage. A double kill for the Susano. BaRRaCCuDDa will dash forward. He drops his ult as well, but it's more disengaged than anything else. And it looks like the Bolts will have to be satisfied with two, barring some lockdown onto ScarAbs.
No dash
There you go.
available. Here comes BaRRa. There goes Scary. BaRRaCCuDDa can only watch on in horror from a range as his teammate falls down once more. The Olympus Bolts, they've already taken the Pyro. So what else is feasible at the 13-minute mark? I'd argue the Gold Fury, especially with a double hunter composition. Pulled out. Jarcorrr nearby. Freya not exactly the best at stealing. And you really don't want to lose your life in a situation like this. Just gotta let it go. The Olympus Bolts, they take the team fight, piecemeal, one by one. Each member of the Solar Scarabs essentially caught out. And then they take the objectives afterward.
Man, my goodness. The Bolts, they're kind of just doing it to the Solar Scarabs here today, aren't they? Game one looked very similar.
Hold on, LASBRA's BaRRaCCuDDa, you barrel stuffing?
Yeah.
You got Bramble Blast, right? Okay.
Would you have played that differently?
Assuming Bramble Blast was up, it roots. Like, just throw it out. Why? I don't.
All right,
Why
fair.
you're a ranged god? Why'd you get into melee range before you even threw the first auto? And I assumed he was getting in melee range to land Bramble Blast, like confirm it, make sure you're getting that true proc to get the root, but throws autos instead. I don't know, man.
Well, LASBRA far enough away at the end of it there. Maybe BaRRaCCuDDa wouldn't have been able to finish off the kill either way.
Then why is he walking at him?
The implication. Look,
What are you gonna do? Say no?
the way that game two has gone here, so much different. Well, how we've gotten here
No
feels very different. That's
way.
a solo for LASBRA. Really nothing going the Solar Scarabs' way right now. This is where these games break open, right? When you get a little bit chaotic like this, where LASBRA's walking up to speed and soloing Sam
And taking the speed.
and taking the speed, this is when these games just crack wide open. And what's felt different this game, though, the result is the same, and it's a massive lead for the Olympus Bolts at 15 minutes. It hasn't felt quite as like I'm caught out, self-inflicted from the Scarabs. This has just felt like better scrapping, better 3v3 early here in game two.
The Olympus Bolts certainly playing a bit more cohesively on the map as of right now, and we'll have an easy POI to focus that cohesion very shortly. Pyromancer gonna rejoin the land of the living. And
Force
I
fire.
don't think it's gonna be at 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Why not? What are they gonna do?
What's
Say no?
What's the implication, Myth? And the Olympus, I mean, look, I don't know if the Solar Scarabs are strong enough to say much about it. Yes, they probably are. Fire Giant swings around at this point in the game. This would be a nice play. Get something onto BaRRaCCuDDa. BaRRaCCuDDa has beats, has shell, has fields of love, and still has life. SMITE will dump through.
Got him.
If you're bringing that many, you gotta get the kill. Unfortunately, ScaryD's gonna die on the other side of the map. I'm telling you, Myth. I'm telling you, they're doing it. They're doing fire. I knew it. I knew it. The Solar Scarabs, they bring 4 over to the left side of the map. God, the Scarabs,
Wow,
they gotta get tier 2. That'll be fire to 4 members of the Olympus Bolts at 16 minutes in game 2.
And they don't even get the tier 2 tower. Jake standing nearby is able to stop them. SMITE, I've seen crazier, but you know what? He got the red buff, thin margins. Survives nonetheless. The Olympus Bolts are in a unique position now where Fire Giant, yes, of course, incredibly valuable, but a little bit more difficult to leverage in the early game than otherwise. You don't exactly have the itemization to actually shred towers. Fire Giant helps, but how much does it really help? I think we're probably in a position where you can start sieging tier 2s. I'd have to assume so. It's a double hunter composition. Why not?
Yep.
What are they going to do? Say no?
All right. Comedies and 3s, Myth. I think that was the 3rd time.
I'm going for 4.
That's bad practice by you. Yeah, it's
so tacky.
Olympus, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you're the Scarabs, I mean, you're handedly down, but it took, I more look at the fact that it took 4, a full-on collapse onto BaRRaCCuDDa to finally grab that kill. And it ends up costing you a Fire Giant anyway. The answer from the Scarabs, no, I'm not defending tier 2. I'm pushing up a wave over on right. And so tier 2 in mid goes down. And it looks like a tier 2 on left also going to quietly go down. And so no soft defense from the Scarabs. Instead, at the 17.5 minute mark, 2 exposed Phoenixes in the Solar Scarabs base.
And they've got minion waves the Olympus Bolts pushed up in both mid and left. I do not envy the man that's going to have to stop LASBRA right now. He is very, very strong, has beads and Magi's
Glad
available.
it ain't me.
Yeah, glad it ain't me. Yeah, well, you know what? The Scares figured out their versus 1 strat, and it's bring 4.
Yeah, right. Well, they're sending 4 to Laz.
Did he have Blink?
It's a Phoenix seat. You gotta kill LASBRA. You gotta kill LASBRA. The Solar Scarabs do, but they've lost Phoenix on the left side. Now twice in a row, the Bolts have been happy to trade out 1 kill for a big objective on the map. BaRRaCCuDDa early beads.
Okay.
Doesn't result in much. Big knockup from ScaryD, and now the Scarabs with some wind in their sails walking forward, but ScaryD has been isolated by Ven and BaRRaCCuDDa, who have backpedaled, and they've got plenty of damage at this point in the game as well. And it'll have to just be 1 for the Scarabs, but also 1 Phoenix for the Olympus Bolts.
Dave, Jarcorrr blinked in as Freya up against LASBRA and said, I'll do it myself. We are killing somebody, and it worked at the cost of the left Phoenix. Yeah, I don't think that's exactly valuable. Again, the Olympus Bolt Siege, good, yes, by composition, bad based on timing. I think the Solar Scarabs, had they just grouped up, probably could have defended their base. Pretty unlikely that they needed to lose a bird there. But now that the Olympus Bolts have had time to take left side bird, just about every tower on the map, they're going to come back stronger. I mean, they haven't spent any of the gold in pocket just yet. This is a tough situation.
I mean, you've got 50 seconds left on this FG. What a first FG it would be. You get a bunch of tier 2s, a left side Phoenix. I don't know if they'll siege the right side tier 2, but
why not?
You have a little time to get it done. That'd be the most worthwhile 15-minute Fire Giant we've ever seen.
There's not much competition in the 15-minute Fire Giant department, right?
It doesn't there's like 3 examples of it.
Yeah, I've been here for 4 years. I think I may have seen just about 3.
So we've made history here, Myth.
Well, not us. We've witnessed it.
We've witnessed history, right.
That's right.
We just happen to be the ones talking about the history.
Well, talking in the mic. I'm sure there are tons of people talking about it.
Well, yeah, you're right. Twitch chat probably mentioning it. I mean, this is
Keck
one.
W, Scarabs got 15-minute fired.
That's a real good Twitch chat impression. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Solar Scarabs, if you're going to come back into this game, we're in like triple fumble territory for the Olympus Bolts right now, and they are just simply so far ahead. They just spent so much gold and have hit some really big power spikes down the stretch here. Baskin feels near unkillable right now. Full item in a tier over ScaryD, who's had some great initiation. ScaryD has just hasn't had the damage from the rest of the squad and the ability to walk forward, to their credit. Are you defending this Fire Giant if you're Solar Scarabs? Are you bothering?
you're 11,000 gold down. Can you defend? No. Should you defend? Absolutely.
I mean, you
if
lose
you
the
lose this
fire
fire, yeah, you lose the game. It's as simple
Well,
as that.
the question is, do you defend fire? Do you defend your Titan in 3 minutes without the FG?
Yeah, I'm thinking you defend Fire Giant. Best case scenario, maybe you send one to try and steal and pray that it works. And then you just hedge your bets on the fact that Titan's pretty strong at the 21-minute mark, so you could probably 4v5 defend it there. Phoenix is, I think, a foregone conclusion if the Olympus Bolts get fire for themselves, but Titan's certainly defendable. Yeah, this is a game
They
where
made their decision.
it's hard. Okay, we're not defending the Fire Giant. Grab tier 2 on left. Get a little bit of gold spooled up. That's enough to get the old Odysseus bow on Mr. BaRRaCCuDDa. I mean, some AoE damage. That's damage on everybody, you know?
Now LASBRA and Baskin can't blink in if you keep their blink in combat.
Scary's making sure Sam doesn't die for the speed buff this time, dropping it early.
Yeah, well, every once in a while, a game will just kind of spiral out of control. And even 9 to 4 kills, I don't think accurately describes just how lopsided this game is. 9 to 4 seems like a pretty average, like,
Yeah.
20-minute mark. You know, you're probably up 3, 4, 5,000 gold.
Yeah. Kings versus Dragons,
right.
gold's dead even.
I'm not thinking 12,500 gold and 10,000 experience at the Bolts are up. This is
22 minutes in.
This is a smacking by the Olympus Bolts. And you know what? I think that tells you that the Bolts so effective at pushing. I mean, 9 is not a few kills, but the handful of kills they've gotten, the Bolts have been so effective at catapulting that into gold leads. If it was like 20 kills, you're like, yeah, you should have 12,000 gold.
Legitimately, it was just a one pick in solo. The Solar Scarabs say, well, we can't let it go unanswered. They rotate the rest of their team to left, while 4 members of the Bolts are on fire. I don't know. I mean,
so
yeah.
you think it's been given to them?
A bit.
We'll see if a kill is given over. Oh, my God. Oh, that is disastrous. That is the last thing you want to have happen. LASBRA with a ridiculous pull. He's laughing in the player cams.
That's a mercy killing right there.
That is the only way that this game could have ended. And it is going to end, by the way, at the mercy of the Solar Scarabs. Olympus Bolts.
Let them live, guys.
Are they back? Are they not? Who knows? But they look real good here in this set against the Solar Scarabs. And the Bolts have now won 3 straight in Phase 3.
So fortunate that we're not on the desk, Dave, because that is a difficult game to break down. I think it's like one key moment, right? I'd focus on the fact that it took 4 to kill BaRRaCCuDDa, and the Olympus Bolts essentially killed the Fire Giant in the time that took. They won the game right there. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah, this is a now recentering time for the Solar Scarabs. Because at least up to this point, in a lot of the sets that we've watched the Scarabs play, and they end up losing. You remember, for a while, the story was Solar Scarabs are going to 3 against everybody.
That's the Titans now. You're talking about the Titans.
Right, but the point is, for the Scarabs, we're not going to 3 against these teams anymore, and so we're starting to get. We have 2 weeks left of Phase 3 of the SPL after today, and then playoffs and group stages. I mean, we're getting there, and so this Solar Scarabs team, especially after a set like this is recenter, VOD review, find our identity here towards the end of Phase 3. But let's focus on the good, and that good is the Olympus Bolts, and good is great here in game number 2. LASBRA runs over the Scarabs on the Susano. We've seen that a couple of times over the course of this weekend. Nothing different here. Olympus Bolts 2-0 over the Solar Scarabs. We'll go back to the desk to try to break this one down.
It's going to be difficult to break down. I mean, I think maybe put it best is this is just a W key game for the Olympus Bolts from minute 1 up until the game was complete. I mean, the Olympus Bolts were constantly running down the Solar Scarabs, getting those objective plays. I think kind of dialing it back over, especially Trelly to that fight over on the left side where 4 people go over, take all that time to kill BaRRaCCuDDa. Meanwhile, what are the rest of the Bolts doing? Oh, hey, there's a Fire Giant over here that looks way more appetizing. Sorry, Barra, good luck, have some fun. We're going to take the more objective-minded play, make sure to grab that Fire Giant. And it just felt like the Solar Scarabs couldn't really find their footing in this game. The only kills they were really able to find were when they were truly deathballing against the Bolts.
Yeah, I'm going to stay away from discussing the Solar Scarabs. Let's talk about how good the Bolts looked, because that seems nicer. The Bolts really did. They've been looking real clean as of recent. I think this is the kind of game that you want to make sure that you're stomping, right? Because if you're not, then you're asking yourself, bottom 2. That's where we don't want to be. We're kind of close. Are we really bottom 2? Bolts said no. We're going to prove that today. We are not going to be falling in that bottom 2 standings. They looked clean as they should, and this is much more in tune with what we expected from the playstyle of the Olympus Bolts in phase number 1 of Season 9, right? They were looking top of the standings, give or take. So this is what we expected, and we knew they could perform this way.
Yeah, kind of seeing the Bolts return to that stride that they had back in phase 1 and phase 2, and now kind of seeing them get their feet back under them. And that was something that was really worrying for a lot of the fans, maybe even for some of the players themselves, was just how long is it going to take the Bolts to kind of get themselves back and going? How long is it going to take them to kind of pick things back up? It seems that here, at least here in phase 3, took them a little while to get there, but seems they're doing pretty well with it right now. And luckily for us, we've got LASBRA standing by for our post-game interview.
Yeah, the new, improved, and taller LASBRA. Unluckily for you, this is a wide camera shot, so the magic revealed a bit here. LASBRA, you've now won 3 straight in phase number 3. You feeling like the Bolts are back? Are you ready to say it?
Yeah, we're back.
Look, this set felt dominating, right? Early in game number 1, so maybe mispositioned Solar Scarabs gives you guys a win there. Game 2, what do you think goes wrong for the Scarabs, and what do you think goes right for the Bolts?
I think having early deaths are just so important right now. So I mean, I just got fed from the start, and there's no Aegis on the backlines and whatnot. So I just have so easy way of getting kills.
Yeah, look, I mean, Susano's looked good over the course of this weekend. I know we've talked a bit about Beads, Aegis, that whole dynamic. Susano is a pick even outside of this weekend. You think still in meta once Relic situation returns to normal?
Yeah, he's very strong right now. I mean, Cribbles are very strong into him. They didn't have any Cribbles, so I mean, yeah, even with Aegis, he's still a strong pick.
Still work to be done here, right? You're trying to avoid bottom 2, but with a win here over the Scarabs, you've created a good bit of distance over the Scarabs, over the Valkyries themselves. You want to get a chance at the phase 3 playoffs. Do you feel a weight off your shoulders with an important win like this?
I mean, not really. I think we're going to make top 6 regardless, even if it was today. I mean, we had some close games against the other teams, the top teams. I'm sure we can get the wins when we need to.
Bolts feeling good. LASBRA looking good. And another win here for the Olympus Bolts. 3 in a row. And LASBRA and the Bolts are starting to roll. That's it for this interview. We'll head back to the desk to break this one down.
Yeah, thank you so much. The power stance.
It showed how low Dave.
It was funny. I look over, I see it there, and I'm like,
Mike just ruined the illusion right before.
It's all gone, bro. It is all gone. But one thing that's not gone is at least the mentals for the Olympus Bolts. You can see it in LASBRA's interview that he's definitely feeling a lot more confident with his squad now, and really kind of talking to some on the important points. I mean, as we move towards playoffs, as we start moving towards Worlds, that top 6 so important out there, and the fact that they're able to go to Game 3s against some of these top teams, they're able to find these clean wins against teams like the Scarabs, and hopefully for them at least maybe try and find one against the Valkyries. That was a team that they had lost to in the first half of the phase, so we'll be keeping our eyes out on that matchup later on. This is just a much more confident Bolts team out here. I mean, you see Venenu is diving in 1v2, 1v3 against enemy players even this early into the game.
Yeah, I mean, and that just shows a level of confidence as well as just confidence in your own play and confidence in your team. I think everyone on the Bolts, except for BaRRaCCuDDa that one time, that no one was going to help Bear underneath that tower. But in every other situation this game, the Bolts knew that the help was always going to be on the way. And unfortunate, LASBRA found Sam. Sometimes at the speed buff was able to steal that, sometimes able to find those kills. It just seemed like, when a Susano gets off to this great start, 6 kills, anyone he finds in the jungle, anyone LASBRA found that was in a 1v1 situation, definitely losing in that regard. There's just no way you're ever fighting into that. I think the team as a whole kind of feeling themselves a bit as the game went on, and then that game winning, I mean, I guess you could call it game winning. The Bolts were already in a winning position, but that 3-man typhoon there from LASBRA towards the end really cemented. It was the nail in the coffin, so to speak. Not too many kills. I guess Jarcorrr even. That's a highlight if you're looking at the Solar Scarabs. The Freya was able to get 4 items online and not go negative in that regard, but just a forgettable performance here from the Solar Scarabs.
Yeah. LASBRA 8-2-5 on the Susano to round the game out. Venenu with a 2-0-9 performance. And 3 games in a row now that he's gotten to play Ishtar. I wonder if teams are kind of now eyeing up the Bolts and seeing, well, Venenu's getting pretty comfortable with these Hunters mid, getting pretty comfortable on this Ishtar specifically. I mean, you even look back to the couple of Cernunnos games that he played. There was a 1-3-2. That one was a loss up against the Warriors, but then a win the next one, a 5-1-11. So the Hunters mid, at least for the Olympus Bolts and for Venenu specifically, has been something that has kind of not necessarily been a new breath of fresh air for him. And we've been seeing things like the Chiron come into the mid lane, the Needs and whatnot, but traditionally much more of the ability style hunter. So seeing that Venenu has that confidence to play these more auto attack centric hunters, definitely got to be at least a nice light for the Bolts.
And that's a good topic to bring up, because I too was a little bit curious as to where the meta was going to go for Venenu in particular, because he used to have these staple gods. He started playing Cuckoo for a bit, didn't look too clean, and I was just wondering when he was going to find his real home in the mid lane as of this new meta, and it looks like, yeah, the Ishtar is certainly working for him. He's got that Chiron in the back pocket as too, but, you know, I think that the Bolts as a whole, LASBRA said it himself, the Bolts are back.
Well, the Bolts are back. They're able to find themselves a win. Let's take a look at the schedule and the standings, see how this game has shaken those ones up at the very least. For the Olympus Bolts, a 2-0 to start the day. Our next set of the day will be the Camelot Kings and the Valhalla Valkyries. And to close out our Sunday, it'll be the Atlantis Leviathans and the Tartarus Titans, so make sure you're sticking around for the next 2 sets as well. Should be very fun ones to watch. Should be very important ones, at least for the Atlantis Leviathans and the Titans. Titans still trying to close up that gap between the 5th and the 4th place spot. Leviathans trying to hold on to their #1 seed as they're sitting at the top of the standings right above the Jade Dragons, who are hot on their heels. Kings and Oni Warriors immediately right behind. So if the Camelot Kings can also kind of close that gap, it's a couple of wins separating each individual set, 2 between the top 2 and then the next one immediately below that. And now with the win by the Olympus Bolts has really created a big gap between 6th and then that 7th and 8th spot. And that's kind of something that was being talked about in the interview, was, you know, and something that was being talked about even by Dave at the beginning of that game, which was a win for the Olympus Bolts here makes it that much more difficult for the Scarabs. Because it's no longer, okay, well, we're just, you know, 1 game away from getting there. Now it's the Solar Scarabs need and the Valkyries need to win out minimum 3 more games than Olympus Bolts. Not just win 3, but win 3 more sets than the Olympus Bolts or even the next highest team in the Tartarus Titans to break back into that top 6.
Yeah, and I think more importantly, the Bolts, they're not worried about the bottom 2 anymore. They're trying to climb even higher, right? They're not concerned about, are we going to fall in that bottom 2? Now they're like, can we take over? Can we go to 5th, 4th, anything in this situation to try and climb up in those standings? So I imagine the Bolts probably feeling pretty good after this one.
Well, set 1 of the day is all wrapped up, but we still got plenty more SMITE action, so make sure that you stick around. We got the Camelot Kings and the Valhalla Valkyries kicking off right after this break.